Hello, everybody, and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to discuss the planetary transits or Gochara that's going on in December 2025. This talk is from a Vedic astrology or Jyotish perspective, so ancient Indian astrology that's more than 5,000 years old. And it seems like the theme for this month is Ring of Fire. That seems pretty dramatic, and the picture here is pretty dramatic, and I don't know that it has to be that dramatic, but it might be that dramatic, actually. So let's take a look at what we've got going on this month. Note beforehand, the information presented is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical, financial, professional, or life advice of any kind. If you are in need, please contact an appropriate professional for support. You might take a minute or two to read the rest of this disclaimer. And some announcements and orientation, especially for those of you who are new to the channel. So the big announcement is I'm offering a level 1 introductory Vedic astrology course in January. It's going to be 12 Wednesdays. What did I say? 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Anyway, the deadline to apply is January 7th. So if you're interested in that, if you feel like it's the right time for you, then email me at heartlightastry@yahoo.com for an application so we can get that started for you. Also, auto dubbing is available in 11 languages on the channel. 3 of them are new: Dutch, Polish, and Korean, in addition to the other languages listed here on the slide. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. Also, my channel is all about playlists. So these sorts of monthly videos, they're in my Gochara transits playlist, but there are others as well, because in my monthly talks or monthly transit talks, I always use famous birth charts. So I'll be going through several famous birth charts during this video, but you would never know based on the title of the video. So just keep that in mind. Also, if you do like to learn astrology by looking at famous birth charts of people, places, and moments in time, I have a birth chart archive list 2025 video. I list most of the famous charts I've analyzed on the channel and the videos you can find them in. But again, I update that list every spring, so there's a few, like since April, that are not on that list, but April 2026, I'll be updating that list for you. All right, so some of the newest videos that I've posted, in case you missed any, Bharani Nakshatra, which is a lunar mansion, the new moon or Amavasya on 20th November 2025, and the Shishubh and Amala yogas, which are attractive combinations in Vedic astrology. So if you're new to all this and want to learn Vedic astrology, get started, or to get more on talks like this, I've listed some videos at the bottom of the slide that I would start with, because they'll create a solid foundation for you to start learning. All right. Okay. And so now, what's moving in the sky this month? These are the dates for December 2025. So December 2nd, Sun transits to Jyeshta Nakshatra. December 4th, there's a full moon in Taurus or Vrishapa and Rohini Nakshatra. December 5th, Jupiter re-enters Gemini or Mithuna, since it's in retrogression right now. December 6th, Mercury enters Scorpio or Vrishika, and then that same day there's going to be an exact aspect on it by Jupiter. December 7th, Mars enters Sagittarius or Danu, Rashi constellation, and simultaneously Mars will be entering Mula Nakshatra, and we'll have an exact aspect by Jupiter. Okay. Then let's see, December 8th, Mars has an exact mutual aspect with Saturn. December 9th, Venus enters Jyeshta Nakshatra, Mercury enters Anuradha Nakshatra. December 15th, Sun transits to Sagittarius and Mula. Again, there's a samkranti here. And then on that same day, Ketu will give 5 and 9 aspects. December 16th, Saturn has an exact aspect on Sun. December 19th, there's a new moon in Sagittarius and Mula. Mercury enters Jyeshta Nakshatra, Venus enters Sagittarius and Mula simultaneously. So if you haven't realized already, like as I'm reading these off, like the two big spots that are going to be very active during this month are Jyeshta Nakshatra, which is the last part of Scorpio, and Mula Nakshatra, which is the first part of Sagittarius. Okay. Now, if you're not familiar, that part of the sky, the kind of cusp of Scorpio and Sagittarius, is considered to be what we call a gandanta point. So it's a very unstable point for two reasons. One, it's unstable because you're shifting signs which have different elements associated with them. So you're basically from Scorpio to Sagittarius, you're going from water to fire. But the other thing is you're also changing nakshatras. So there's a dual level of instability here. Okay, so this is a pretty gnarly point. Okay. The other thing is that, again, once Sun crosses into Sagittarius, you're going to have Mars there and Sun there, the two fire planets in a dual fire sign. And on top of that, you're going to have an aspect of Ketu, which is going to make things explosive and unusual and, that sort of thing. So, I was hoping that the picture I put on the first slide was just overly dramatic. I don't tend to be overly dramatic. I tend to be pretty level-headed about things, but I'm like, it might get kind of dramatic this month. So, we'll see. Hopefully not. I always hope to be wrong when there is potentially bad or disruptive news, but that's how it goes sometimes. So, yeah. So, Jesta and Mula, you're going to see this over and over again in this month. So, December 21st, Saturn has an exact aspect on Venus, and that's the December solstice, Uttarayana. December 25th, so that's Christmas Day, right? Mars enters Purvashada Nakshatra. December 27th, Mercury goes combust or asta. December 28th, Sun transits to Purvashada Nakshatra, and Mercury enters Sagittarius and Mula. So, again, right now we have what Western astrologers would call a stellium. Vedic astrologers will call it pravraja yoga in Scorpio. That's going to be shifting all that energy, all that planetary energy that's focused on Scorpio will be shifting to Sagittarius by the end of the month. And then in January, it's going to be shifting to Aquarius. So it's going to be very, very there's going to be like a hyper focus in different signs, depending. And then so you might want to think about or check out where Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn. Oh, I missed Capricorn. Yeah. So after Sagittarius, Capricorn, and then Aquarius. So again, you're going to have this tight cluster of planets shifting, month by month, almost month by month, through these different constellations over the next few months. So just FYI. That's a heads up on that. So then let's see, what did I miss here? December 30th, Saturn has an exact aspect on Mercury, and Venus enters Purvashada Nakshatra. And then December 31st, Ketu has an exact aspect on Mars, which frankly, it can be very explosive. And it will be explosive, right? We're going to have fireworks all over the world. But again, this is going to be in where? This is going to be, it's still in Sagittarius. So again, two fire planets with K2 and a dual fire sign. I mean, that may mean that not only is there one big, kind of explosion, but more than one, because again, it's a dual fire sign. So yeah, so we'll see, right? What else do we got here? All right, so on this slide, I've got two different charts. One for December 1st, the beginning of the month, and the second one, December 31st, for the end of the month, so that we can see how the sky pattern is changing. Okay. So both of these charts are oriented. Oh, I should go back. Hold on. I'll back up a little bit. So I use North Indian style charts in my work. These are North Indian style charts. So to orient you, the top diamond in the middle of each of these charts is what we call the ascendant, rising sign, first house, or lugna in Sanskrit. Okay. And each one of these little top diamonds has a little one in the bottom corner. Okay. The one in the bottom corner refers to the first constellation of the zodiac, which is Aries or Mesha in Sanskrit. So both of these charts are oriented. You could see it's like the ascendants at 1 degree here. Both of these charts are oriented so that we're at 1 degree Aries, so that we're comparing, apples to apples, oranges to oranges. The other thing is that when we have this is called a natural zodiac, when the first constellation is in the first house, which not always is, obviously. But when we have Aries or Mesha in the first house or lugna, that creates what we call a natural zodiac, which creates that's essentially a birth chart for the entire world or humanity. Okay, so we're looking at collective energy here, essentially. Okay, so from the first house to get to the other houses, you count inclusively from the first house, and then you count counterclockwise or up and to the left So the second house here is this upside down triangle in the upper left corner. There's a 2 in the corner. So again, second constellation is lining up with the second house. That 2 in the bottom corner does not mean it's a second house. It means it's the second constellation in the second house. Okay, so in the first chart, it's December 1st, 2025, 14:07 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or New York time. And the second chart is December 31st, 12:09 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or New York time. Okay, so in the first chart here, the moon nakshatra is an Ashwini. Okay, so Ashwini, I have a whole video on that. So that nakshatra, and again, if you're not familiar, nakshatra is a lunar mansion. There are about 27 of them. Every night the moon passes through a different one. They all have different energies associated with them. After the moon passes through 27 nakshatras, you get a lunar month. Okay. So Ashwini is all about, pioneering and starting and a lot of energy here. Like it's the symbol of this is a horse's head. Okay. So a lot of like literally horsepower. Okay. There can also be this kind of rescuing energy here. Okay. So the moon is up here right at the top. Okay. And the moon also represents like a public and emotional mind, intuitive mind, that sort of thing. So there can be a very emotional, like kind of this mind of like wanting to do something new, like kind of, very restless type of mind. Usually can even be a little bit like hyper, like a ADD type, because the mind is whirling, it has all this energy associated with it. Anyway, so the dasha period means the planetary period. And so the dasha period, when we see the planets here, um, this basically means that these planets are a little more active or influential in a particular time. Okay, so the dasha period for the first chart here is Ketu combust with Venus, Ketu and Venus happens to be combust at this time. Okay, so where's Ketu? Well, Ketu is over here in the fifth house, which relates to stage, which relates to children, which relates to romance, that sort of thing. And then Venus here, Venus is in the eighth house. Eighth house represents like, uh, long-term, deep, chronic problems. Also, endings and chronic issues and that sort of thing. And Venus is a planet representing spouse-like partners, as far as people go, but also like the finer things of life and diplomacy and social grace and that sort of thing. So, especially in a natural zodiac chart like this, Venus is the lord of the seventh house of spouse-like partner. Okay. So, we usually don't like to see this, as far as like happy times and relationships goes. Okay. So we've got K2 disrupting things in the fifth house of romance. And then the lord of the seventh house has gone to the eighth house of deep problems, and it's combust, meaning you can't see it because it's so close to the sun. You can see it's like less than 10 degrees away from the sun. So when you look up in the sky right now, you won't be able to see Venus with your eyes. Okay. So when any planet's combust, though, you won't see the external manifestations of that planet, but you will feel it internally. So Venus represents love and, compassion and, all these sorts of, sensuality and all sorts. So you might be feeling this way, but again, Venus being combust, you may not be seeing, love or compassion or, sweetheart or your loved ones as much as you would like at the moment. Okay. Which is, again, Venus is going to be combust, through the holidays here. So there might be trouble. So with this kind of setup, I would see like trouble with relationships and romance here. So things might be on the rocks as far as that kind of stuff's concerned for most people. Um, and there might also be fighting as well because Venus is down here in the eighth house of deep psychology, and Sun is there, and Mars is there, two fire planets. And Mars is in its own house, so Mars is going to be kind of overshadowing this. And Mars is in a nakshatra called Jyesta at this time. Jyesta is symbolized by a talisman, so there's like a protective energy. But this could be like a, how would I say, like a, a fighting type of protective energy. The Sun also is transiting from Anuradha, where it was again in how would I say, like a kind of a alliance, winning through forming alliances here. And Venus is in that spot as well. But the thing is that, again, you may not be seeing this alliance here. It might be more of like an online type of thing. But the sun, it's basically shifting into this Jesta energy. So you've got these two fire planets, very strongly dominated by Mars, which is a planet that represents like action and fighting, can't even be violence, unfortunately. And when you get Sun and Mars together in this protective Jesta energy, you can get like physical, military law enforcement type energy. Okay. So this sweet little Venus here is getting overshadowed by the Sun and Mars. And the thing is, Mars is also combust as well, because Mars is about 10 degrees away from the Sun. So this fighting that's going on is something that's not seen, because you can't see Venus, you can't see Mars. And so on the surface, things might seem like they're okay, but underneath there's some fighting going on, behind closed doors, perhaps. The other thing is that the eighth house here is the house of scandals. Okay. So there can be potentially scandals related to fighting and relationships to, higher levels of executives, heads of state and that sort of thing. Okay. So let's see. So there are different yogas in this chart, a lot of them actually. Yogas are planetary combinations that give meta, kind of extra effects to a chart that are beyond planet analysis and house analysis. So there's a mangalik yoga here. So this Mars in the eighth house is another indication that there's a problem with relationships. We've got a Hamsa yoga here. That's kind of nice. That's Jupiter exalted and Kendra fourth house here. So that's nice. At least we have this, pretty strong Jupiter that's not only exalted but retrograde. That line under Jupiter's means it's retrograde going back towards Gemini here. So this pretty strong Jupiter is aspecting all this. Looks like, again, fighting going on behind closed doors. The only thing though is Jupiter, you can see, is like in the first degree, of Cancer. So this means it's sandhi, it's unstable here. Okay, but at least there's some, Venus at least is an Anurada. Jupiter's shining on here. But again, you're going to lose Jupiter in a few days. And so this might start to, what's kind of like bubbling, some kind of fight bubbling under the surface here might start to come forward. Okay. And again, Venus is only going to be in this Anurada energy. Venus is trying to, like Jupiter, you have the two great natural benefics on this fiery situation of Sun and Mars and Jesta. But again, Jupiter is moving away, so you won't have Jupiter's influence. And Venus is going to be shifting from Anurada, which is about, victory through alliances and it's also going to be in Jesta. So it might be where like the partner here is no longer playing nice and is actually in defensive mode. All three of these planets will be in defensive mode pretty soon. Okay, so we've got the Hamsa Yoga, Lakshmi Yoga too. Actually, that's a lot of money potentially involved here because the Lord of the ninth house, Jupiter, is exalted in a positive house, and the Lord of the whole chart, Mars, is in its own sign. The only thing is Mars is not going to be there very long, and the other thing is Mars is in a negative house. So this might actually be like that just crossed my mind. This might be all these like Black Friday sales and stuff like that, like because the eighth house also represents other people's money. So again, it might be all these kind of buy now while you can type of energies going on. There is also a Parvata yoga, which means there's a leader of leaders here. In this chart, and there's a Gajikesari yoga, so there's some networking here. And because the Kendra is the four houses in the middle, we've got Moon, Mercury, and Jupiter. Jupiter and Mercury are news, media, communication, speaking, talking, writing, and Moon is public. And the Moon and Jupiter, their relative positions to each other means like networking. So again, this could be like a up to it, come get your discounted sweater or whatever it is that you're looking for. But again, this is ending fairly quickly here. We do have solar and lunar yogas here, so there's some protection, a little bit of protection with sun. So again, things again, it seems like this leadership energy down here, even though things are shifting and changing behind the scenes and everything probably looks okay, that's going to be shifting pretty soon. It's like the lid is going to be blown off of this pretty soon, especially once on this parade. Again, Mercury will be in this mix in the Scorpio with Venus, Sun, and Mars in a few days, and then again, very within about a week, Mars is going to be in here. Then the parade is going to move from Scorpio to Mula, or not Mula, well, Mula, but also Mula Nakshatra, which is the first part of Sagittarius, but mostly Sagittarius. And then again, once these planets start shifting to Sagittarius, you're going to have Ketu aspect on it and Saturn, which are two natural malefics. So it's all on the surface, nicey nice. Things are bubbling under the surface, and then again, it all might kind of come to a head pretty soon by the middle of the month. So we have a retrograde exalted Jupiter. I mentioned that. Compost Swan Mars. I mentioned that. There's also a Sati here. So Sati, that's the relative positions of Moon and Saturn. That's a 7.5-year period where there can be this like a lot of people are afraid of Sati. It's not always bad. It's usually a challenging time for a lot of people, but the one commonality is that usually there's a loss of a long-term support system because Saturn only goes through the whole zodiac. It takes about 29 years for Saturn to go through the whole zodiac. So this might be a support system that was part of someone's life for about that long. So again, there's more. Again, that's usually more indications that there's problems with relationships in this chart. But there's this, moon in Ashwini, so there's a mental, emotional new start or path to, I believe, self-healing and healing of relationships, because clearly things are very challenged here with relationships. The other thing I wrote here, so elder protection maturity. So the reason why I wrote elder protection maturity, well, the protection energy is coming from Jesta. But the other thing about Jesta is it can symbolize like an elder person or elder statesman type of thing. So we have Mars and soon Sun in Jesta, and then Venus pretty soon. So, and Mars is again the Lagnatia. This is the planet ruling the whole chart here. So when the ruling planet has gone to the 8th house of deep psychology, this could be reviewing, revising, thinking of the self in one's position and identity, because the 1st house represents physical identity, but also, emotional, mental identity, that sort of thing. And again, the moon is in Ashwini here. So again, it looks like there's some, it's almost like we're not quite there yet, but people might start to think about like, okay, we're wrapping up 2025 and 2026 is coming up, and a lot of people sort of like, okay, kind of like mentally, like a fresh start potentially. A lot of people write resolutions. So again, it looks like this Mars, ruling planet for the chart, is undergoing this transformation of wanting to mature, wanting to, become like shift. Because Mars, is a kind of personality type of planet. It's like the rebellious teenager, I mean, not somebody who's calm, cool, collected, they're very active and probably rebellious, but, it might actually be kind of nice that there's some sort of maturation process going on here for the whole chart. Again, it might come with a fight though, okay, because Mars represents siblings, Sun represents father, that sort of thing. So this could be like a teenager rebelling, or it could be like a younger sibling rebelling, because Mars also represents siblings. It could be like a younger kind of, like a business associate or a colleague kind of maturing and pushing back, but in hopefully, a good way. Because sometimes that's just, that's the maturation process, right? Is like you have to stand up for yourself and push back against, you know, people in authority, whether they're parents or bosses or whatever. But sometimes it's just like, big show, like a fireworks show, that sort of thing. So, at least right now, it looks like things are moving that direction, but then things are shifting to Sagittarius and Mula, and Mula is all about the symbol of Mula nakshatra is, like roots tied together. So it's about planting new seeds, but also potentially like, pulling up roots, pulling up weeds and that sort of thing, especially when you have natural malefics moving through there. And we're going to have like a lot of natural malefics in Sagittarius, as we'll see in the second chart here. So there is this kind of notion of like, especially with the holidays, like not sitting at the kids' table anymore, like not kind of being that compliant, and starting to step up into one's own self identity and self maturity and that sort of thing. But again, this could also potentially be a scandal as well. Maybe related to a relationship that's hidden. That could be. Like maybe somebody's, you've been dating somebody for a while and none of your friends or family know about it, that kind of thing. Because the K2 in the fifth house there, that could also be like a romance that's hidden or unexpected as well, So, I guess it'll be interesting to see who comes to all these holiday parties. That might be the fireworks explosion. And when somebody shows up and, oh yeah, we've been dating for years and nobody knew about it. Okay, so then the second chart here, let's see. The moon nakshatra has shifted from Ashwini to Kritika. Okay, so Kritika, and it's in Taurus instead of Aries here. So Taurus is a earth sign, fixed earth sign. So this is going to be like getting more grounded. The moon is also exalted in Taurus, so that's very nice. And it's almost a full moon, so that's also, more power to the moon. But Kritika is symbolized by Kartikeya, who's the celestial. I always mix up his title here. He's the commander in chief of the celestial army, and that's what he is. So again, there's potentially a lot of fighting going on here. So we've already started to rev things up with all this Jesta energy, fire planets and Jesta, and now we've got the moon there. But Kritika is like a mixed nakshatra, dual nakshatra, because the other part of Kritika is it's kind of nurturing energy, because Kartikeya was raised by different foster mothers. But the symbol of Kritika is a sharp instrument, So the moon is here in the second house of speech. So this could be some kind of emotional speech that's both defending and nurturing, something. What would that say? Home, happiness, because the moon is the ruler of the fourth house of home and happiness, that sort of thing. But Saturn is aspecting here as well. So, there's some shift or change going about here related to the moon. Okay, so that might be some kind of announcement again. The dasha period in the second chart is Sun, Venus, Sun, Mercury, which are all here in the ninth house of Sagittarius. So again, look at this big gaggle of planets here. Mars and Sun, the two fire planets. Venus, again, relationships, romance, and Mercury is friends. Mars is siblings. Sun is father. And then aspecting all this in the ninth house is K2, which will bring an unusual, unexpected energy, Saturn as well, which brings delays and obstacles, and Jupiter, which will actually bring some protection. Okay, so hopefully that'll keep this from being too wild. But this is a pretty wild situation here. I mean, right now you've got, let's see, by the end of the month, you will have, so we have Mercury still in Mula at the end of the month here. So again, Mercury is business, Mercury is friends, Mercury is, writing, Mercury is speaking, Mercury is education. So this could be shifts and changes, because again, this Mula energy is all about planting new seeds and discarding old seeds and that sort of thing. And then Mars, Sun, and Venus are in Purvashada by the end of the month. So there's a sorting energy. So they're probably sorting through this mess because, again, all these planets have shifted through this Gandanta point. The other thing is that they're shifting through, you can see K2 here Well, let's start with Saturn. Saturn is aspecting all these planets in Sagittarius. And you can see Saturn is in 1 degrees 55 minutes in the second chart. So all of these planets, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, not only did they cross the gandanta, which is a pretty precarious thing to do, but right at the beginning here, right when they got into the first degree, because you can see in the first chart here, Saturn was at 56 minutes, and it just stopped going retrograde. Now it's going progressive here. Basically, when all these planets went through the first degree, like as if it wasn't enough that they were unstable through changing constellations and changing nakshatras, but they had a direct aspect by Saturn. Remember when I read off all the dates, it's like, oh, direct aspect by Saturn, direct aspect. So all these planets are going to get hit by Saturn, which is a planet representing delays, obstacles, anxiety, doubt, fear, depression. This is like a hot mess, okay? And as if that wasn't enough, okay, so we have Saturn. So first they're crossing the Gandanta and basically Saturn simultaneously, almost simultaneously. Then you can see K2 here. We've got 5-9 aspects for K2 while Sun is in Sagittarius here. K2 is at 17 degrees 57 minutes. And you can see, as I mentioned, Mars just crosses K2 aspect on the 31st of December. But we're going to get more. Mercury, Venus, Sun are also going to cross. You can see Sun's going to cross K2 probably the next day or two. And then Mercury. So basically, all these planets crossing the Gandanta, shifting constellation, shifting nakshatras, passing through direct aspect of Saturn, passing through direct. So, and K2 is the south node of the moon, representing like sudden unusual separations, endings. Usually very explosive, especially when you have K2 on either of these fire planets, Mars or Sun, and you can see basically K2's on both. So this is what I mean by ring of fire here, okay? Because K2 is in a fixed fire sign, Leo, in the 5th house, but you're going to have this K2 energy on the 1st house, which is a movable fire sign, and then Sagittarius, a dual fire sign with all these planets running through here. I mean, this is a pretty wild ride going on here in the 9th house. And the 9th house represents authority. It represents religion. It represents institutions. It represents father. It represents guru, teacher, that sort of thing. So whatever this, again, it looks like something's cooking in the 8th house in the first chart at the beginning of the month. It's all coming to the surface, and frankly, it's probably hitting the fan. So, but luckily, there is a saving grace. This Jupiter, is going to protect to some degree, bring some sort of, and this could also be a legal thing as well, because Jupiter and Mars, that could be a legal thing. So this could be like legal problems for some entity or authority or leader, because Sun is like president and Mars is like the CEO. Leadership, we've got a bunch of leadership energy here. The other thing going on, okay, as if that's not enough. Sun here in the 9th house, that creates a karako, bhava, dasha Sun. That means that there's problems with authority, leadership, father, okay? Not necessarily between two people, but, it might just be on their own. Okay, the other thing, okay, as I mentioned, all these planets around the Sun, Mars, Venus, and Mercury, by this time, they're all combust. So a lot of this is going to be like an internal, shock and awe type of moment, frankly. Okay. So the only planets you can see in this chart by the end of the month are Saturn, again, the great malefic, Moon, which will go in and out of being seen. It's moving for its fullness here, so you can see it, but then once it gets close to the Sun, it'll be combust as well. Jupiter, so the great benefic, and then the Sun. Okay, so basically 3.5 planets: Sun, Saturn, Jupiter for sure, Moon in and out. K2, Rahu, you never see. They're shadow planets. Mars, Venus, Mercury, no. So this is going to be a very dramatic cycling going on here, especially when you have two diametrically opposed forces, Saturn and Jupiter, on all of this. It's like hold on to your hats, roller coaster ride, frankly. Okay, so anyway, but the dasha period here is picking up all these planets as if, I mean, not like we really needed it, because, I mean, just the fact that all these planets are in the ninth house here in Sagittarius is going to be either. But again, leadership energy, that's the sun, Venus and Mercury. This could be creative writing, speaking. This could be, and then Katie's on here. So this could be like a speech or writing to try to smooth things over, considering the everything pretty much, blew up here. Okay, like trying to create some positive um, take on this, or maybe a spin doctor type of energy. Because the other thing is, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury. These are all aspecting the third house of nonverbal communication. So this might be somebody like kind of uh, fakely apologizing, you know, um, trying to spin it so that it's not as bad as it actually is, type of energy. Yeah. Anyway, so in this chart, we've got a bunch of yogas. We got this pravraja yoga. That's just 4 planets in one house. So that gives a life focus. Parivartana, we have an exchange of houses between. What do we have? Oh, that's kind of nice. Mercury and Jupiter here. So the Mercury will protect the third house here of writing, nonverbal communication, and Jupiter will protect to some degree, again, not completely, but protect what's going on here in the ninth house here. So again, that's going to be a lot of writing back and forth, speaking, again, smoothing things over, it looks like. We do have lunar yoga here. So this Jupiter will be supporting the moon. We have a budhaditya yoga here. That's an intelligence combination. But again, that's more like a math and science type of combination. So again, there's some sort of like almost engineering type energy here, especially because Mars and Saturn are mutually aspecting each other. And when you get Mars and Saturn together, you get like a engineering type of construction type of energy. We also potentially have Shishub Yoga here. Um, put a question mark though, because it's not a clean one. We do have Moon exalted in the second house, which generally would be a Shishub Yoga as long as there's no malefics on it, but we do have an aspect by Saturn here. So, and Shishub Yoga gives like a attractive kind of face and eloquence and, that sort of thing. So again, I think there's this like, sort of public spinning, of some negative event to make it seem nicer than it actually is, kind of going on. Yeah, so, sorting through logistics here, I would say, with all this Saturn Mars energy going on, creative words, law, total authority. There's some courage, though, for sure. So the third house, besides representing nonverbal communication, represents courage, and we have all these fire planets, Mars and Sun aspecting there, plus Mercury's protecting and strengthening the third house. This could be inspired action, because we've got this, massive Jupiter and all this stuff. Um, giving some sort of hope or again optimism to whatever's going on here. This could also be something going on online, like an online organization, like leadership of some online organization, because again, Mars, Venus, and Mercury are all combust, so you can't see them. So this might be a lot of internet news, media news, or involving an, not just like a state, but it could be like a head of an organization, like maybe, well, maybe somebody like Jeff Bezos. He's head of Amazon, right? I mean, he's got an online organization. It's kind of similar. Like you've got this online organization, but it's all about like delivering products. So there's something very physical about it, but also something like not seen or hidden. It's not like a storefront. Like a brick and mortar store type thing. And there's something quite unusual about all this too, because again, Katie's going to bring in this like weird twist to the whole situation here. But again, all these planets passing, a parade of planets going through the Gandanta and then also getting squeezed by Saturn and Ketu. I mean, that's going to be a lot of unexpected endings. And, this might be a bunch of like CEOs, like all either getting tossed, frankly, or quitting or, that kind of stuff, you know. So yeah, by the end of the month, again, it's in the beginning of the month. I kind of feel a little bit bad giving this report at the beginning of this because right now it's probably feeling and looking okay, pretty good. But by the end of the month, you can see it's like, wow, things are really gonna amp up here. Okay, so now I was going to go through, talk about the different planets a little bit more in depth, and then I'm going to intermix different famous charts so that you can, because these charts that I add into the monthly video basically are very similar to the current sky pattern. So you can kind of see um, by, previous examples, historical examples, or people, how these energies can potentially play out, manifest in the 3D mundane world. So in this chart, we've got Sun and Mars, Surya and Mangal. And again, the reason why I start with these is because they're going to be heating things up for sure this month, towards the end of the month. So September 2nd, Sun transits to Jyeshta Nakshatra. So it's moving into this protection energy. It's in Scorpio, so that's a friend sign for Sun. It's fixed water sign, so emotional. And it's conjoined with the compass Venus and Anuradha and Mars and Jason. So I talked about this. Like Venus is going to be trying to like hold things together, but then things are going to be pretty defensive pretty soon. There could be to represent physical protection, senior leadership, and then some sort of hidden network or passion or scandal again. Something is underneath the surface that's not going to be underneath the surface for long. Then December 7th, Mars enters Sagittarius. So here the parade is moving to Sagittarius and Mula now. And then there's going to be exact aspect on Jupiter. So Mars and Jupiter together, this could be like a legal situation. Sagittarius is a friend sign to Mars. It's a dual fire sign. So again, fire planet moving into dual fire sign. So things are heating up probably in at least two different ways because it's a dual sign. And again, planting and destroying seeds, land, law, because Mars represents land and property, and again, fighting, especially with Jupiter on it. Then December 8th, Mars had an exact mutual aspect on Saturn. So I mentioned Mars is in a dual fire sign, Saturn's in a dual water sign. Mars is combust. So this can be land or fire that you can't see because Mars and Saturn, again, when you get them together, you get engineering energy, but they also represent land. So this might actually be since Saturn's in a water sign, that could be like some sort of land or fire underneath the water, like an earthquake, type of situation. And then Mars in a dual fire sign, that could be like a volcano exploding. So this might indicate some sort of natural disaster, unfortunately. And the thing too is that again, they're both going to be in sandhi, so they're going to be in the first degree, which makes them unstable. And again, a gandanta point, so dually unstable. And they're both not in very nice nakshatras. I mean, Mars is in Mula. The deity associated with Mula is Nriti, which is a form of the goddess Kali, the goddess of death. And then Saturn's in a nakshatra called Purvadrapada, which is the front legs of a funeral pyre. So this could mean like a lot of destruction of land, property, earthquakes, volcanoes, especially since it's like they're both dual signs. This could be like I always think of like tectonic plates, like shifting over each other. Two plates like shifting over each other. So hopefully that's not correct, but it might happen. Then December 15th, Sun transits to Sagittarius, so we're getting even more fire here. So we got two fire planets and dual fire sign. I mean, things are heating up. It's a friend sign for Sun, but by this time you're going to have four natural malefics in Sagittarius. I mean, Sun, Mars, Ketu, Saturn. Okay, but at least you have the SWA, Jupiter, kind of protecting you a little bit. But again, and then explosive with some protection. Because with Sun transiting Sagittarius, you get the Ketu 5-9 away. So the Ketu is gonna stir things up in weird and wild ways until Sun moves out of Sagittarius January 14th. So yeah, things are gonna get really kind of funky, for a month here, I would say. But yeah, things are gonna get kind of wild at the end of the month. Then December 16th, Saturn has an exact aspect on Sun, so this could be a physical shift or end to leader, career, health. Those are all things Sun represents. 21st of December, there's a solstice, Uttarayana. So I'm going to have a separate video on that. So I'll go into depth. Not just the solstice. When I talk about the solstice, I actually do like a 6 months out, from December solstice to June solstice. So, kind of a 6 months looking forward type of video. Then December 25th, Mars enters Purusha nakshatra. So at least it's not a mula. So Purusha, at least it's like a shifting back and forth, like kind of processing, sorting through the mess of whatever just happened here. Because let's see, Mars 25th. Because Mars was in this Mula Nakshatra energy for a good 2 weeks plus. I'm sure a lot of damage can get done in that amount of time. Even just a second, right? You get the right combination and things just go haywire. Then December 28th, Sun enters Purva Shada Nakshatra. So the two leadership planets are sorting through the mess, towards the end of the month here. And then December 31st, K2 has an exact aspect on Mars. So this is like another unexpected hit, accident, infection, inflammation, because when you get K2 and Mars together, it could be like a technology thing, an accident, infection, especially if we're talking about medical stuff. So yeah, enjoy this first week of December before things heat up, I guess. Okay, so here's our first famous chart for this month. So this is the chart for Camille Claudel. She's a pretty famous French sculptor. She was born December 8th, 1864, 5 a.m. It says there is apparently a birth chart for her. The only thing, though, is that I've looked at French birth charts from around this time, and I don't think that they actually go to the minute on them. I think they round up to like the hour or half hour or quarter hour, something like that. I don't think it's the exact time. But even if it is like the half hour, uh, she should still be like a Libra rising here. So maybe the nakshatra is not correct, but the rising sign is probably correct for her. So anyway, I just took 5 a.m. We'll take a look at it. And she was born in Tardenois, France. Okay. So the Lugna nakshatra is Vishaka, which is basically victory, but at all costs. So, and that's already giving some intensity to her. Successful, but with loss, collateral damage. Sun nakshatra is in Jyeshta, so protective here. Okay. And the sun, again, represents a father and authority, and it's in the second house here. Second house represents family and inner circle. So it looks like there's some, again, protective, authoritative, energy here, which I think you could see in two different ways because the ninth house is a dual sign of Gemini. So it's a dual air sign, and the ninth house represents father, but it also represents like authority and that sort of thing. The sun in Jyeshta brings some protection and gains through a protective father, which she did have. But I think that there's also potentially some losses here. And I think the losses maybe a little bit surprising, but sun is in Jyeshta. The star of Jyeshta is Mercury. In her chart, Mercury is in Mula, with this like endings type of energy. So even though on the surface it seemed like there was this protective father, and she did have a protective father, there's also this undercurrent of destruction, okay, which might be shows up as like enabling, but it could also be because Mercury is aspecting the ninth house, and it's the lord of the ninth house. This could be the destruction of friendship with the father, and things really went haywire for her when her father died. So if you don't know her at all, she was a famous sculptress and, fantastic, considered a genius or whatever. And her father was supportive of her and protected her, whatever. But her other family members, like her mother and brother, maybe I think she had a younger sister too, basically disowned her. And her father was financially supporting her as well. And when he died, within about 10 days, they basically committed her to a psychiatric facility, where she spent the last 30 years of her life. So it was this dramatic shift once her father died. And again, I wouldn't necessarily see that in this chart right off, because again, if somebody spent 30 years of their life basically in a hospital or jail, prison of some kind, it may be the same thing for her, frankly. It's a little controversial as to why her family committed her. Apparently, the hospital staff suggested that she was well enough to be at home. And I think in 30 years, her brother only visited her a handful of times. Her mother never visited her or something like it was like they basically like tossed her away and threw away the key, essentially. But with that sort of life, I would have immediately suspected that there were a bunch of planets in her 12th house of isolated places, losses, expenditures, and that sort of thing. But she doesn't have any planets there, which is weird. But the lord of the 12th house is Mercury in Mula. Okay, so yeah, and then the thing is, she was born into Mercury. Okay, so there's this sort of like what is it? What do they call it? Premonition? No, that's more of a psychic thing, right? It's like this, the trailer that sort of gives you the some tip off as to what may happen, kind of thing. The enticing trailer. So she was born into Mercury. And the other thing is Mercury literally could be Mercury, but Mercury represents hands and arms, and it's in the third house here of handiwork. And she has aspecting this Mercury here, Saturn and Mars, which again, as I mentioned previously in the previous slides, when you get Saturn and Mars together, you can get like construction type stuff, and engineering type stuff. But Saturn and Mars also represent land. So she's somebody who's using her hands to non-verbally communicate through forming shapes of land and earth. I mean, it's very literal here in her chart. Okay. The thing is, this Mula part, what I potentially got from that is that all this work she's doing with her hands, sculpting these things, there was something toxic or deadly about it. Like it might literally be to her hands. Like she was a young woman, but I don't know when she got older. Maybe she had like a ton of arthritis in her hands and arms and shoulders. So she's leaning forward and like, literally digging up clay from the earth and then forming it and all this kind of stuff. But it could also be, and that was another thing I was thinking about, is that I think for her, it could literally be that the chemicals involved were toxic, like heavy metal type stuff. And that might have been because I wasn't seeing, a lot of mental health issues in her chart. There was some, but not what you would expect for somebody who lived 30 years in a psychiatric facility. Okay, there's definitely anxiety in her chart and moods, like depression, anxiety. Um, okay, because you have like Saturn in the fourth house is the lord of the fourth house, and there's a Parivartan exchange of houses between Venus and Saturn. So Saturn's going to come back to its own house in the fourth, which is going to be a very strict mother, which she was. Apparently, one of the reasons why she was disowned essentially by her mother was because she was involved in scandalous affairs with like Auguste Rodin, who's another massively famous sculptor at the time. And also, her sculpture itself was very sexual in nature. So, very conservative religious mother was like, no daughter of mine. I don't want to be associated with a daughter like that. So, mom pretty much gave up on her. And then her brother also became very religious fairly young. So, they were very strict. And since she was a woman and financially dependent on her father and then Auguste Rodin as well, and then her father died. Well, before her father died, Auguste Rodin basically, when what did she do? I don't know if there's a straw or whatever, but essentially she sort of cut things off with him, relationship wise or sexually or something. And so he basically cut her off financially, and that put her in dire straits. So, and then so she didn't have the support of Auguste Rodin, and her father died, and then all these people ganging up on her like threw her away essentially. So anyway, for somebody who spent 30 years locked away in a high psychiatric hospital, I would expect a different chart. But if you dig deep enough, you'll see that there's stuff, underneath the surface that's like sort of like the charts I was looking at for the beginning and end of the month. There's stuff boiling under the surface that's like unseemly or toxic or something like that. And that's kind of the vibe here. So anyway, sorry I went off some tangent, but I don't know. There's a natural flow to all these things, and maybe the Jyotish video kind of got hold of me. The Jyotish video, if you're not familiar, is considered to be sort of like the spirit of Jyotish. It's sort of overriding, guiding divine hand. So maybe it just took me on that track for a while. Anyway, trying to get more focused here. So Sun Jesta protection. So some authority protection here. So she did have gains through that, but again, there's some seediness inherent in that. The day lord here is Mercury, and the Hora lord is Mercury. So again, Mercury. I kept looking at this Mercury. I was like, but this Mercury is in Mula. So hands, also hearing. I don't know if she had a hearing problem. Could be a hearing problem. But destructive decisions, destructive speech. And also, she's got Sun here in Saturn, Sun in Jesta in the second house. So defensive speech, defensive writing, destructive actions could be for her. So yeah, I mean, this Mercury's pretty prominent. And then she's born into Mercury. So I was like, what's going on with this Mercury? So I think this Mercury really did her in. The other reason why is that what was the time frame here? I'm trying to remember the dates. So she was committed to the psychiatric hospital 10th of March, 1913, which was about 10 days, 7 to 10 days after her father died. They just, her brother signed off on that. Although the form said it was voluntary, but she didn't sign it, her brother did, so it doesn't seem very voluntary. But she was in the moon period. She basically was in the moon period when she was committed to the psych hospital. And the moon is aspecting the third house, or the 12th house. So that might have started things, but it's like, why didn't she come out? You know what I mean? Because after moon, she's running Mars, and after Mars, she's running Rahu. But this is the thing. Moon is in Revati nakshatra, and the star of Revati is Mercury. Okay? And before moon, she was running Sun, and Sun was a pretty good period for her. But Sun is also in Jesta. The star of Jesta is Mercury. Mercury. I'm speaking like French. Sun, the star of Jesta is Mercury. So again, there's this like Mercury coming through during her Sun period, and Mercury coming through in her moon period. What about Mars? Mars was in Rohini, which is pretty good. But Rohini, the star of Rohini is Moon. So underneath Moon is Mercury. So again, there is some tying together of these three planets, the ones that she ran when things started going south for her professionally and personally, and she started doing weird stuff like disappearing and like destroying her own work and weird stuff like that. I'm actually wondering if what started this, like her family was not happy. I mean, her mother and brother or whatever were not happy. Maybe I think the younger sister was jealous of her as well because she was famous and independent again. She's a very strong woman at a time when women were, had no rights, very little rights or acknowledgement or whatever. But but basically when she started running Sun, because whenever you run a planet, you also activate the stars that they're in. So during the Sun period, she started activating this Venus or Mercury, and then Moon, same Mercury, and then Mars, star of Moon, Mercury. The star of Rohini that Mars is in is Moon, and Moon is in Mercury. So it's like these, like, the Russian dolls, one's embedded in another. And then the 12th house is Mercury, is ruled by Mercury. And then you get to Rahu, which she died. She lived a long time and she died in Rahu, but Rahu is in its own star. And the thing is, Rahu can be seen as like a obsession, compulsion, energy, ambition, which she was. But what I'm seeing here is because Saturn is in exaltation sign. So there's strength here. And then Venus is there. So she's there's a parivartan exchange of houses between Venus and Saturn. So Venus was in its own sign. That would give her strength and like, of body and mind and that sort of thing. And Saturn there and Rahu. Now, the thing is, Rahu is in Swati nakshatra, which I've mentioned, can give a lot of nervousness. So I think she had like an anxiety, and Saturn can give like anxiety as well. So I think she had a nervous, anxious kind of demeanor about her. And then the thing is, this moon, when Saturn comes back to the fourth house through parivartan with Venus, you have a very strong Saturn on the moon. So this is going to bring anxiety, doubt, fear, depression to the moon. Okay. And Saturn is also on Mercury. But Saturn is in Saturn's in Chitra. I mean, Chitra is symbolized by a gemstone. So this is going to be like land that's very precious. This is her sculptures and stuff like that, especially with Venus in its own sign. So there's a lot of strength of personality and body here. So she endured all this, and there was some fear and anxiety, but not so much that I was like, she deserved to be in a psychiatric hospital for 30 years. But what I'm wondering is when this Mercury was activated in the sun period, even in birth, sun period and moon and then Mars, that might have been the heavy metals in the clay she was using to sculpt all these things starting to affect her mentally and emotionally, because Rahu can symbolize things like poison. So maybe she was poisoned. And the other thing is I looked it up just to see if there was any notes anywhere on the internet about her being poisoned. The thing is, when she started losing it, or seemingly lose it, she used to accuse Auguste Rodin of poisoning her. And I was like, oh, there you go. So maybe, I mean, if he was putting weird stuff in the clay she was using, but it might have been that the instruments and the materials she was using to build her sculptures had a toxicity associated with it. And that's what kind of started tipping her mentally. Although, and then that was enough ammunition for her family to use against her to like lock her away, even though organically I wasn't seeing a lot of mental health issues. I mean, yes, anxiety, yes, maybe depression, but not um, like Van Gogh's. I mean, I saw Van Gogh's chart. Van Gogh's chart was like pretty wild. I did that, I think, a year or two ago. And his was definitely showing like, wow. I mean, I don't even know how that guy functioned. But hers, there's so much strength here in the lugna, and when the first house is strong, that gives somebody like, strength of character and I don't know if it's character, but personality and physical and else. So anyway, yeah. So anyway, I got kind of lost in that whole controversy, but in her chart, I was just not seeing her as. Again, I think the story was a bit different. I think again, there's something toxic related to what she was doing with the sculpture that sort of tipped her mentally, and then her family used it against her essentially. To protect their reputation, because they were very religious, at least mom and son and their brother, and then also their all the inheritance she got from her father. So she didn't get anything. I mean, she apparently when she died, she was buried in some generic place, and then was dug up later, and then her bones were tossed in with a bunch of other, some sort of mass grave of unmarked, poor people. And then her brother was like a diplomat to China and all this kind. And for his chart, like if you spin this chart to the third house here, which would be like siblings, you can see Mercury's here in Sagittarius, and the Lord of Sagittarius is Jupiter, and Jupiter's gone to the 12th house of the third. So that's him going off to China. So he went off to an isolated place. So it makes sense for him, the brother going off to an isolated place, but it doesn't really make sense for her. Um, but the thing is, the problem with her is relationships. Like if you look at her seventh house is a mess because Ketu's there. That's going to bring really unexpected, unusual energy. Saturn is aspecting there where it's, debilitated. And then what else does she have? And then Venus is there. So this is like basically being exploited as a woman because Ketu's in Bharani Nakshatra, which is symbolized by a womb. So, and the seventh house is again spouse like partnership. So this is Rodan basically exploiting her, and business partners exploiting her, not being trustworthy, obstructive. Like it's kind of a mess here. But not her 12th house, which is, again, surprising. Anyway, so how does this? So I got off. Hopefully, not too long, but it is. I don't know. I just find it really interesting. I like these controversial charts because it really kind of tests you, in terms of like, is what you're seeing lining up with the story that's told in the news? So in this case, I would say no. So how does this chart recreate this current sky pattern? Well, Sagittarius is aspecting Sagittarius and Pisces, which it is currently doing. Then you have Sun, Jupiter, Mars, and Scorpio, Mercury in Sagittarius, Venus in Libra. At least it just was. The other thing is, if you watch my videos, I'm into films and stuff. There are actually two movies about her life. Camille Claudel, which is the older one, that had Isabelle Adjani and Gerard Depardieu from like the 80s, I think. And then there's a more recent one, Camille Claudel, 1915. Basically, the first one is her life up until she got committed into the hospital, and the second one is about her life after she got committed. And the second one is a more recent film that has Juliette Binoche in it, so another famous, all these really famous actors involved in these movies, so they were pretty good. So anyway, let's go through house by house. The Lugna again, Libra, Tula, movable air sign. So a lot of ideas, this is like the design piece related to sculpting. She's got an exalted Saturn here in Chitra, gemstone, precious earth, precious sculptures, parivartana with a sandhi, Venus. Venus is in the first degree here, which again represents, spouse like partner as well. But Venus back in its own sign will be Swan, it'll bring strength. Venus in Uttarashada, so again, victory energy here. But Rahu is Swa by star, and Rahu's in Swati. So there's ambition and being a sculptor for sure, but there's and strength and resilience to be an earth architect or sculptor. She herself was also beautiful, but she's unusual because women at that time, apparently she did go to art school, but there was very few schools that allowed women to participate. And so she found one and went through that. And then, and her father, I think, paid for that. Ambitious, a bit obsessive, I would say, about her sculpting. Nervous, potentially a bit unstable, but I did write poison down here before I looked up that apparently she accused, Rogusta Dan of poisoning her. So I was like, okay. And then when I read that, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. The second house lord is Mars, which goes to the eighth house of long-term problems, chronic death, destruction, all this. Mars in Rohini, so again, the stage for these players of inner circle family is very attractive. So again, I think this is the social face that the family had. But Mars goes to the eighth house of, death, destruction. So especially when she ran Mars, through the later part of her life, all these endings and destruction happened due to her family, inner circle. Um, Sun is in Jesta. There's a combust Jupiter as well. Um, so physical protection gains through father, career and groups, creative, spiritual, intuition, but unkind. Jupiter's combust, so this is like not fair. This is an inner circle that's not fair. And again, the inner circle is like any type of family-like person, not just her biological family, but people close to her, like Augusta Rodin, and long-term problems related to that. Unkind. I actually like. I put here wardens. Like that's what I was getting. Like Sun and Jupiter. This is like again policing type energy, which her family did to protect their stellar reputation or their social face or whatever was going on there. Protect a well-to-do life, but again, a lot of competition here. You've got all these fire planets. Fire will bring a lot of competition. Then the third house lord is Jupiter, which is combust. So this is going to be a brother you don't see very much because he was off, in China. And then also, once she was committed, he only visited her a handful of times, like 6 or 8 times in 30 years. I mean, not even once a year. Yeah, so and then aspected by Saturn and Mars, Mercury's and Moonlight. So this is going to be a lot of again, this gave her her sculpting. This is her literally digging in the dirt, which she did as a kid before she really started doing some beautiful sculptures. But this is also like an engineering brother here, you know. Um, and again, this is also going to give her with this Saturn in the first house and the third house and the Venus and all this. This is going to give her an artisan energy in her chart. But again, I was seeing potentially deadly poison, like literally maybe mercury. That could be. Um, fourth house here, fourth house lord is Saturn, and it comes back to its own house in Venus here. So again, there was some. This gave her an education, you know, as a female artist, which was unusual at that time. And but she that was her happy place, was just spending time like creating. I put landcrafts here, like sculptures, you know. Then the fifth house here, fifth house lord is Saturn. So this is a sculptor, designs, ideas consultant. So she was a consultant for designers, which I think you could consider people like Rodin, but also she would design. She would draw these designs, but then a lot of them were cast by other people. So she was designing, she was more on the designing side, not always on the physical implementation or execution side, although she did plenty of that as well. But that's the thing too, is that, again, these bronzes and all these other stuff, she used all these different, things that she was inhaling and melting and stuff like that. So maybe that was part of what, tipped her mental balance, potentially poisoned her. And But anxiety, depression, I would say here, because it's Saturn so strong in the fourth house of happiness. Mother, also, I would say, is a public enemy here, because a mother, moon, which represents mother, is in the sixth house of enemies, and this massive Saturn, this very conservative mother was an enemy for her. And then also, this is going to bring trouble with work and reputation, because this massive Saturn is on Moon, which is the lord of the fourth house of work and reputation. And Saturn is on the Moon, which is the lord of the 10th house, and also Saturn itself is aspecting the 10th house. So it's going to bring a lot of trouble to her career moving forward. Then the seventh house here. Oh wait, I missed it. Sixth house. Sixth house lord is Jupiter, an aspect its own house. So there's going to be some protection here. But the moon is there and aspected by a very strong Saturn. So difficulties of the mind, anxiety, depression, mother is public enemy, trouble with work. Okay. Then the seventh house lord is Mars, and the Ketu there in Bharani, which again is symbolized by a womb, and Ketu there is going to be like unusual. So again, her work, as an independent business here, would be pretty controversial. Like all these sexual figures she was drawing and sculpting and stuff, aspected by a debilitated Saturn and Venus. This is going to be a very difficult, like way to, being an independent artist, financially solvent as an independent artist is going to be very difficult for her. So she spent all her time doing this, but did she actually make money from it? Probably not so much. Um, she had her reputation was good, but the money wasn't coming in back it up. Um, so yeah, and that difficulty, separation, and relationships. Again, Saturn, debilitated Saturn with K2. I mean, that's a very destructive energy as well. And the seventh house is a path forward in life, independent business and relationships, business partnerships, spouse-like partner. Destructive, successful sculptor of the female body, but I would say exploitation here as well. Both of her work, both as her, like, it was kind of funny when I was reading her Wikipedia page, like, somebody described her work, which is a very, because Rodin's work was much more sort of gentle and romantic and like sensual, and hers is like more, I think, a little bit more aggressive and in your face in terms of sexuality and stuff. And like, somebody wrote her as a critique of hers that she had power in displaying the grotesquerie. So I was like, okay, that pretty much fits the seventh house energy here. But I also say like, comes with sponsorships, because again, once she ran the Mars period, Mars is the ruler of the seventh house. It's like the end of her, love relationships, business relationships, it all pretty much went to crap, it looks like here. Um, and it was always tumultuous before that, before it really ended. Then the eighth house here, the Lord is Venus, retrograde Mars and Rohini, aspected by Sun and Jupiter. So losses through family, speech, partnerships, independent business, creating innovative, beautiful earth pieces though. So this is her like her creative mind, but also her rebelliousness as well that wasn't well received. Um, Protective, maybe this, maybe a bit paranoid. She was considered to be a bit paranoid when she started kind of losing it later on. But spiritual leader, master. So some of her works like really started taking on this more kind of philosophical and spiritual dimension. Uh, so that's all here. This Mars retrograde in Rohini. This is going to be a very innovative, again, sculptress of, beautiful works, like really enticing works, and she's going to be a master, and again, some spirituality here as well with this Sun and Jupiter aspecting. Then the ninth house here, the Lord is Mercury aspect the zone. So she had a very strong father, but this might also be like a strong but toxic authority figure. Maybe him because he enabled her, paid her bills and stuff. But maybe again, other people in her life, like friends, toxic friends, could be because Mercury represents friends, and it's in the third house, which represents friends as well. So I don't think everybody had her back. Let's just put it that way. And again, with this K2 in the seventh house, this could be people, kind of like I didn't get to that yet. The next chart I do, but there's going to be like false friends, false, tumultuous lovers and stuff like that. Yeah, not a happy seventh house for sure. Pretty destructive seventh house of, personal relationships. Then the let's see, 10th house, Moon is the Lord, aspected by Venus, Jupiter, Saturn. So there's a consultant of public consultant of sculpture. So I didn't see this as day-to-day work, but she actually juried a lot of sculpting competitions. So I could see that here for her. Then the 11th house, the Lord of Sun, aspected by Mars. So high-level artisans were her friends, or groups that she associated with. In the 12th house here, 12th house Lord is Mercury, aspected by Moon. So sorting through mind and emotions, probably during her Moon period, she was trying to sort herself out. How successful that was, I don't really know. Probably not enough to keep her out of trouble and out of the hospital for 30 years. But yeah, pretty interesting woman, and also interesting chart given her history. It's not all what you would think it is in the beginning, but since we have Rahu in the top here, that's going to give us a chart that's a bit unusual. Um, and also things that are hidden going on, in this person's life. So that's her. Yeah, pretty interesting chart. Okay, so on this slide, going through Mercury and Venus, Buddha and Shukra transit. So 6th of December, Mercury enters Scorpio, Vrishtika, and there's an exact aspect by Jupiter on it. So this is a neutral sun for Mercury. It's going to be conjoined by Sun and combust Mars, both in Jesta, combust Venus and Anuradha. So again, this is authority, writing, publishing, rules, law, news about something along those lines, probably military actions as well. December 9th, Venus enters Jesta Nakshatra. Again, the protection energy. Mercury enters Anuradha Nakshatra. So there will be some positive words bringing people together, but again, some protection of loved ones or defensive loved ones. Maybe an older sister that one's not seeing. It's very specific, but good communication. 19th December, Mercury enters Jesta. Venus enters Sagittarius or Danu, so tone's really changing. Once December 19th, that's defensive speech, losing social grace, behavior. So this is like the mask coming off, of like making things look pretty. And then again, it might be a very destructive action type situation. December 21st, Saturn has an exact aspect on Venus, so this could be physical, anxious, unusual delays because K2 is going to be on this Venus, as well as Mars and Sun. Obstacles, relationships, hidden fights, maybe even violence, but unseen passion, unseen diplomacy, hard bringing things together in the mundane 3D world. December 27th, Mercury goes combust or asta. More thinking, reflecting, deciding, planning, less communication, maybe not seeing friends, aunts, and uncles, because these are things that Mercury represents in its asta or combust. Business associates as well. This might be going into a little bit of retreat mode. Um, then December 28th, Mercury enters Sagittarius or Mula. So this is a neutral sign for Mercury, but it's aspecting its own house of Gemini, which should bring some strength to that house. And there's through a parivartan, there's a parivartan with Jupiter, so that'll strengthen both Sagittarius and Gemini for a while. But at the time, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury rolling through the Saturn Ketu gauntlet in Sagittarius, again, explosive fire endings, but some protection, mostly of inanimate things, not people, but communication, a lot of communication news coming from this, leadership involved, unusual authority, military action, potentially scandals. Yeah, something's kind of blowing up here, you can see. Then December 30th, Saturn has an exact aspect in Mercury. Venus enters Purusha Nakshatra. So same as above, but starting to process what happened and smooth things over. Towards the end here. Right, so here's a second famous chart for you. This is the day that and time that Napoleon was crowned emperor of France. It happened to be December 2nd, 1804, 15:30 p.m. in Paris, France. Yeah, let's just start going through it. So the Lagna Nakshatra is Kritika, so that's that fighting / nurturing energy. Again, commander-in-chief of the Celestial Army, which is kind of what he was going for almost, right? With this emperor title he gave himself. And the sun and moon were both in Jesta, so protection energy. Okay, so protecting the head of state, the title of president, head honcho, the moon, protection of the moon, the public, but also the emotional mind. Okay, and Mercury's there as well, so protecting the public mind of head of state is we're getting here in the 7th house. Okay, the day lord was sun and the hara lord was sun, so again, head of state, head honcho, president, um, king, or in this case, emperor. He was part of the reason why he went this route of declaring himself emperor was he was trying to shift away from the previous editions of government in France of the kingship and that sort of thing. So he was declaring himself something new so he could, shift up the power dynamics there. The Virtapsha was Mercury, Mars, Saturn, and Venus. So Mercury and Mars and Saturn and Venus. Yeah, so actually almost all those planets. Mercury is again communication, Mars and Saturn are land, Venus is like creativity, and friendships and relationships and stuff like that. So a lot of this actually, when I was reading about the background here of why this happened, besides him wanting to distance himself from the previous, monarchy, um, was that he was backed by a lot of the big landowners in France, and they were he was beneficial to them. But what they wanted to do, they wanted to install him in this position and keep him in this position. So part of the emperor position was decreed by law by the French Senate was that there was a hereditary part of emperorship. So his descendants, if he had any, or his blood relationships, I think would determine um, the next emperor after him. As long as he was around or not around. And so basically, you were keeping it in the family, essentially. Which also helped the landowners maintain control of who was in charge and who was helping them benefit through the government that was installed there. So which brings me to a more specific point, is that actually, I did not realize this, but apparently Napoleon became the legal emperor of France 18th of May that same year, so about 6 months before. So the Senate passed some sort of law or bills claiming that he was the emperor. You know, I did look at that chart briefly, and what's interesting is that Sun was in Critica in Taurus. So just as this chart is Taurus rising, if because I didn't have an exact time for the legal passing of the Senate thing in May 18th, but if you shift the chart to the sun and do a sun chart, Surya Lagna analysis, you get back to Critica and Taurus, which I thought was interesting. The other thing about that May 18th time was that there's a sati sati here. So there was like a loss of a long-term support system, which again, there's this major shift in terms of the, laws dictating, authority in the country. So that all fit, but also that was probably not a great time for him because he only lasted in that position for about 10 years. And then they passed another law getting rid of him. And that happened, was it April 2nd, 1814, almost exactly 10 years later. Um, so yeah, so we'll see this chart, but there's a lot of similarities to the current sky pattern, including Sun, Mars, Mercury, and Jupiter in Scorpio. Okay, Mars through aspecting. K259 aspects, that's going to make this a very strange and unusual situation or event here. And then Saturn is on the Pisces Virgo axis, okay? So the Lugna here, Taurus or Vrishabha, fixed earth sign, Shtir Prithvi. We have a debilitated moon aspecting here where it's actually exalted. Sun's aspecting here, Combus, Mercury, and Jesta. Sandhi, Jupiter, and Vishaka. So again, all this protection energy with Jesta. Vishaka is like a victory at all costs. And then also Mars is aspecting here because Mars has a parivartana with Moon. So you get Mars and Moon all over the chart. So Mars is action, Moon is mind, emotion, public. So this is like basically engineering public sentiment or ideas about authority is what this chart's all about. And then there's some unusual or hidden aspects here. Ketu's in Pusha, so this could be like a false nurturing energy. And Saturn's in Hasta, so this is literally like taking physical control of things. And I would say here, like again, physical control of land for the country. Because that was the whole point of all these landowners supporting him and passing this law so he could be this emperor. Because they were all, supporting he was supporting all their, financial interests. So all this together in the Lugna, protecting the public mind about military might, head of state, lots of speaking, singing news. So apparently this thing lasted for like hours. There was a whole procession. There were a bunch of people there, all the regalia, and then there was like oaths and people speaking and singing and songs, and it was like I think it started around noon, and finally at 3:30. So 3.5 hours of that pageantry, 3.5, and then at 3:30 they were like, "Ah, vive la France!" He's the emperor now, and then it all pretty much diminished after that. By 4 o'clock, I think they all went home. So, yeah. The other thing is that in the Lugna here, did I put it here? No, I didn't. Rahu is aspecting here. So again, there's ambition to all this, and again, there's something hidden, unexpected, even deceptive here going on. So, yeah, and then did I put it in there? No. I was looking at the seventh house mostly. So yeah, protecting the public mind, false partnerships. Oh yeah, false there. I stopped there. False partnerships, trouble in general, victory at all costs, unstable event, leadership. The reason why that's unstable is that Venus is the lord of the chart and it's gone to the sixth house of acute issues. It is Swa, so there's some protection. But also you have this Mars and a Shlesha aspecting this Venus. Mars is debilitated in Cancer, okay? So Mars doesn't do well. And Mars is a symbol for thievery, frankly. And then you have Ketu there. So this is going to be like strange, unusual, but false actions. And Ketu's in Pusha. So this is going to be like, attention seeking actions that display a false sort of like nurturance or whatever. And essentially, this is all for show because he'd been emperor legally for like 6 months. So this is all just a big show. And also, like, it was a show because I think even to him, like, because he, I think, was just a figurehead installed by these landowners to, support their financial interests. But then again, they got tired of him, and then they kicked him out like 10 years after. They passed another law, and out he is. So, yeah. But the whole thing, like, very like thousands of people showed up, and like, the procession, and the Pope was there, and all the big, it was a big, big show, but it was just a show. Nothing official happened. But it was a good show. So, anyway, the second house lord is Mercury, aspected by Saturn and Mars. So again, here, Saturn, again, engineering speech here, crafting speech, but also gains through land partners. Um, the other thing is that the partners here in the seventh house, the lord of that is eight. It's the eighth constellation lord, which is Mars. And Mars again is debilitated. Nasha. Is it also bhavam? No, it's not. Meaning that there's going to be a problem with land and neighbors and all this sort of thing. And then Katie's there. So again, all these people speaking well and protecting this moment are all a bunch of phonies, essentially, is what I'm saying here. And the third house lord is Moon. It's fairly strong because the Moon goes back to the third house through Parivarta with Mars. But you have a karako nasha Mars with Katie. So courage, but false courage, trouble with neighbors, siblings, false actions, getting public attention. So even like there's a story of him, crowning himself, which is like a big, big power move, at least a display of a power move or whatever. But again, it's all false, it's all just a show here. So, yeah, anyway. Then the fourth house lord is Sun, protecting homeland and legacy. So again, protecting home and land, and specifically having a legacy as well of protecting the home and the land. These landowners supporting him and doing this. On the fifth house lord is Mercury, bhavam Saturn, aspected by Rahu and Uttara. So again, sudden, ambitious, victory in controlling a land for generations, is what I was saying here. Sixth house lord is Swa, Venus, aspected by Mars. So nervous but rich landowner enemies that will eventually turn on him, which they did. Seventh house lord is Mars, aspecting its own house. So there's power here, especially regarding land. Bhavam Sun. So that brings in land ownership even more so. Moon, Mercury, Jupiter. A lot of people speaking, talking, singing, aspected by Mars, K2, Saturn. Unusual, false, protecting high position partners, disruption, corruption, false attention, dishonest speech and show. Like it wasn't what it seemed to be about at all. But it was a good show, I'm sure. Then the eighth house lord is Jupiter. Victory at all costs and victory at all costs, but also loss of other people's money, because this ninth, if you spin this chart to the ninth or eighth house, then its lord is gone 12 houses away. So there's loss of people's money here. There's loss of, whatever they had rigged up or engineered here didn't work out for anybody. Yeah, for Napoleon or the actual people, behind him supporting all this. Then the 10th house lord is Saturn, aspected by Mars. Rahu's there. Oh, wait. Sorry. Let me go back. I'm mixing up 9 and 10. Ninth house lord is Saturn. Rahu's there, aspected by Mars. This is like obsession, wild goose chase to secure authority, government, land, figurehead only. There's also a Kala Sarpa yoga in this chart, and here in the ninth house. So this is like massive, strange but unusual, ambition here. The 10th house lord is Saturn, aspected by Mars. So fake actions getting attention. 11th house lord is Jupiter, aspect by Saturn and KT. False nurturing, separation of group. So you can see, despite all the razzle dazzle here, like underneath it all, things are not going well. um, the 12th house here, the Lord is Mars, aspect by Venus. So an attempt to dazzle others with all this big parade pageantry stuff, pomp and circumstance, but weak international diplomacy. So again, a big show, but underpinnings of all this very fake and deceptive, I would say. So he only lasted about 10 years, which again is not too surprising given this chart. Even like this Mars debilitated with K2, especially if this was actually an event that marked a true beginning of leadership. I mean, you don't want a debilitated Mars or Sun. And the thing is, Mars is debilitated, and then Sun is not, but Sun is in a sign that's led by this debilitated Mars. I mean, this is this is all. It's like a quicksand pit. It's all gonna like fall through the center, into the floor here over time, especially when you run those planets. So yeah. Okay, so then the slow-moving planets transits for December. So December 5th, Jupiter re-enters Gemini or Mithuna. And also it's still in Punarvasu Nakshatra. So this is an enemy sign for Jupiter. So it's not, it's best, but it will be in Parivartana with Mercury for a while Mercury's transiting Sagittarius. It's a dual air sign, and Jupiter will be aspecting all the air signs. So lots and lots of ideas here. It will also be protecting its own house of Sagittarius, so it'll give some protection to this. Thank God, frankly, because the Jupiter is going to help protect all this parade of especially malefic planets in the beginning through Sagittarius, through the gauntlet of the Gandanta point and Saturn and Ketu. I mean, if Jupiter wasn't here, it'd be worse than whatever is going to pop up. So then December 6th, Mercury is an exact aspect on Jupiter. So that could be like a, burst of news, communication, education. December 7th, Mars has an exact aspect on Jupiter or by Jupiter. So, just check on that. I need to check on that. I don't think that's true. I think I shifted some of these things. Let me check on that. Hold on. Okay, so yeah, there was a mistake. The 7th of December, I had written on a few slides that there's an exact aspect of Jupiter and Mars, and that's incorrect, so I erased it, but it'll be in the audio, so just ignore the audio of the December 7th Jupiter direct aspect on Mars. So December 8th, though, Mars has an exact mutual aspect with Saturn, and I've talked about that before. Um, that's going to be a really hardcore because these are clashing, and again, this could be like literally like a tectonic shift type energy, whether literal on the planet or in people's lives of different kinds, in different ways. Then December 15th, that's when the K2-5-9 aspect starts up because Sun has moved into Sagittarius. So again, K2 is going to be in all the fire signs. So again, more heat added to all this, including the dual fire sign Sagittarius and Sun and Mars being there. I mean, that's going to be pretty hardcore. Then December 16th, Saturn has exact aspect on Sun. December 21st, Saturn has exact aspect on Venus. So again, this parade of planets moving through Sagittarius are going to get hit by Saturn, which is in Pisces. And then December, which is going to cause delays, obstacles, potential endings, physical obstructions, that sort of thing. And December 31st, K2's exact aspect on Mars. This again, when you get Mars and K2 like this together, it's explosive, but then even more so in a dual fire sign with Saturn in the mix and Sun in the mix. I mean, yeah, that could be pretty gnarly. So be careful out there. That's New Year's Eve, so be careful. So the moon, I do separate videos on full moon and new moon. So let's see, full moon is going to be in Taurus and Vrishabha, Rohini Nakshatra. So this is again, it's going to bring some really positive vibes. Rohini is the most attractive nakshatra out there. So, and that's an exaltation sign for moon. It's going to be aspected by Sun and Mars and Jesta, Venus and Anurata, Saturn and Purva Bhadrapada. So um, creative construction, shelter, emotional retreat, rest. Again, good vibes here because Moon is in Rohini, Venus is in Anurata. But again, there's some underlying things going on that probably are going to fall apart, mid-month here. Then December 19th, there's going to be a new moon in Sagittarius. So Moon is going to be added to all this parade of stuff going on in Sagittarius and Mula Nakshatra. Sun, Mars, Saturn, K2. So the Moon and Mula, this is going to be inner turmoil and starting off a whole new slate and probably seeking some kind of spiritual perspective to deal with all of this because it's going to be, I think, fairly intense. So, but again, I'll have separate videos on these two events later on in the month. Yeah, this full moon that's right around the corner, December 4th. So hopefully I can get that out sooner than later. But I will try because as the moon cycle coincides with the sun cycle, the first day of the month, and then the full moon is going to end up pretty much on the same day. So I've got to squeeze out two long videos in pretty short time. So I'll do my best with that. Okay, so then the third chart here. So I guess we're keeping it in France. This chart is for Barb Nicole Kiko. She is a champagne producer. So I thought, well, this might kind of put us into some kind of positive framework for the new year, even though, again, based on what's coming, it might be a little bit intense, but, sometimes it's like that. So her chart here, she was born December 16th, 1777. She was actually a contemporary of Napoleon, and her family is fairly well off. Her father was involved in politics and government. And actually, Napoleon and his wife stayed at their residence. So, like literally, she's hobnobbing with high-level people. She was born. I don't have a birth time for her, and she was born in Reims, France. So this is actually a Surya Lagna, sun rising chart for her, rather than a Jaya Lagna. So I don't have a Lagna Nakshatra because I don't have an exact birth time. And Sun Nakshatra, though, is in Mula. So Sun is in, Mula here. And again, the symbol for Mula is a bunch of roots tied together. And also transformation, like I always talk about the transformation of the seed. Like when you plant seeds, the seed has to die and change and transform, almost like a butterfly type of energy. It has to die to itself and then survive the journey of being underground and somehow sprouting up, through the soil, heavy soil, and then flourishing into whatever, a lemon tree or whatever it's going to be. And so it's a very precarious journey here, and but the sun represents career. Her career was based on roots, literally. I mean, she's a cultivator of grapes and wine, Well, basically what happened, her story, she has an unusual story, which you would imagine because she's got K2 up here in the top. She's an unusual person. She was widowed at 27, so her husband took over, was in a family business of wine. And when he died, she took over his wine business and developed an early champagne variety using a novel technique called riddling, which helped to decrease the natural sediment that happened during the fermentation process. Anyway, and her champagne is still produced to this day. So it's the brand or company called Veuve Clicquot Ponsardine. Yeah, so it's still out there, what she developed on her own. It's also unusual because in that day, women could not work or own property or anything without the express consent of their husband or father, unless they were a widow. So she kind of like uh, Camille Claudel. She kind of snuck through back door here and became a very prodigious, prominent woman in her field with long-lasting results. But again, under very strange, dire circumstances. Okay. But anyway, so her career was sun is in Mula here. Okay, the moon nakshatra is in Punarvasu or Pusha. It's shifted at 14:51 p.m. that day. So Punarvasu is about cycling, and Pusha is all about nurturing. And that was her thing. I mean, essentially, she's nurturing cycles of grapes here. Cultivation grape. So she's nurturing, agricultural cycles, essentially. Day Lord was either Moon or Mars, depending on the time of day. So Moon would give imagination, and Mars would give, again, like a CEO leadership type energy. But Mars is different than Sun in terms of leadership. Mars is more of a CEO, roll up your sleeves, get involved in the nitty-gritty details, and, dig in the trenches. And that's literally what she did. I mean, again, she developed this riddling technique where basically what they do is they uh, hold the bottles where it's tipping down, so the sediment kind of lands on the cork, and then they turn the bottle so that like the cork will catch more, over time, and then they remove the cork with all the sediment and they top it off with some fresh, I guess, champagne, and then close it up again, and so they get a clear vintage essentially that way. So anyway, hurrah, Lord, I don't know since we don't have an exact birth time. Virgisha was either Jupiter or Saturn. Jupiter would give faith, Saturn would give endurance. I think she had both because both of these planets are aspecting her lugna. And how does this recreate the current sky pattern? Well, you can see now we've got Sun, Mercury, Ketu in the lugna here in Sagittarius, and it's aspected by Saturn and Jupiter. So you're getting this Sun, Mercury, Ketu, Saturn, Jupiter mix in Sagittarius again. Very similar to the, stellium or pravraja yoga that we're going to have created at the end of the month here. So, and this was her lugna, or at least, her Surya lugna here. So again, not all bad. Clearly some really great stuff came out of this, but at the expense of losing her husband and, having to go through jumping through a lot of hoops. But she managed to jump through the hoops, so that's the winning victory at the end of the day. But there are a lot of hoops that she had to jump through, especially as a woman in that time and day. And then the other thing is Ketu is aspecting all fire signs again, and Venus is in Scorpio, so there's quite a bit of similarity with her chart and the current sky pattern. Let's go through house by house. So the Surya Lugna here, Sagittarius, Danu, rising, dual fire sign, Dvasvala, Agni. Sun is there. She has a Digbala Mercury. This is going to bring a lot of intelligence here. Mercury's also in Mula, so her thoughts, very unusual, transformative type of ideas she's going to have, which she did. I mean, she transformed the industry by figuring out this riddling process. And then it's aspected by an exalted Saturn with in Vishaka, so there's going to be a lot of, delays and obstacles here. Also retrograde Jupiter and Maga. But there's leadership energy, spiritual, like, even like hopeful spiritual leadership here. And then maybe a full moon. It's hard to say because the moon is, you can see it's like right here, 26 minutes of Cancer. So literally a few minutes and it would be in Gemini. And this time set for the chart is 12. I just spun it to the sun. So this moon is either in Gemini or it's in Mars or in Cancer. I wouldn't be surprised if it was in Cancer because she seemed very imaginative and that sort of thing. But you never know. So maybe the moon is in this, and the moon is full. So again, a strong moon here. But she also, kind of like Camille Claudel, had this obsessive nature, very imaginative, master of her craft, intelligence, unusual, probably a bit isolated, I would say, because Mercury, Ketu, and Saturn are all here in the Lugna. All three of those are separationist planets. And again, she was I think she was just off doing her own thing on her farm. But then also probably isolated as a woman, because I'm sure she wasn't hobnobbing with all the boys club, going on there. But also she, as a widow, she was kind of disenfranchised from society in a way, So, but maybe it played to her benefit because then she didn't have to, she could just focus on making her champagne, I guess that's how that worked for her. So, and we've got two different things going on here. So I think she tried to keep both of these up, both the wine and the champagne, and then eventually I think mostly switched to the champagne because it was probably the better seller or more unique product that she was making. But hope and endurance, disruptive leader, strength, that's all here, especially because you have Jupiter aspecting its own sign. So again, yeah, I just, when I compare her chart to Camille Claudel's chart, um, again, that's why I'm still kind of confounded by Camille Claudel's chart because it doesn't really line up with her experience of life. But again, I think there were some underlying things going on there that moved her in that direction. So the second house lord is Saturn. We have an exalted Mars here in Shravana. So this is like land, gains through land, also gains through like an oral tradition, like passing on the tradition of how to grow these grapes and all this kind of stuff. I don't think probably most of it wasn't written down. Also maybe aspected by the moon, depending on the moon, where the moon was, but leader in land, traditional activity, a consultant here, um, because Mars is lord of the fifth house of consulting, innovative, rebelliousness. Also, I'd say global trade. Mars is the lord of the 12th house here of international trade. So, yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing. She just took that over without ever doing, I think, probably putting her hands on the ground, and then it all blew up in a positive way, and it still exists. I mean, how many years of 250 years later? I mean, that's pretty amazing. Then the third house here, third house lord is Saturn, aspected by Rahu and Jupiter. Ambition, publishing, ideology. I don't remember reading about her publishing anything, but I think she probably wrote down what she did and passed that along. That, again, shifted her, disrupted but shifted her industry over time. The fourth house lord here is Jupiter. Jupiter's in Maga. So this is just something I've noticed. I've never heard about it or read about it by anybody else, but especially when I see important placements in Maga. Maga is a nakshatra symbolized by the throne, but it's related to ancestors. And I've often seen people who are devoutly Catholic with important placements in Maga. And Jupiter's here representing spirituality. It's in the ninth house of religion. And I wondered if she was Catholic. And when I looked it up, she was a devoutly Catholic person, and her family was as well. And so she comes from a very devout Catholic family or lineage here. Then the fifth house here, fifth house lord is Mars, aspect its own house. So very strong, consultant, innovative, pioneering. Again, the fifth house is intellect as well. And then Mars and Saturn together, she's an engineer. Mars and Jupiter, experienced in law. Ketu's there. Again, a very unusual mindset here, probably somewhat probably untrained, I would say, but to her benefit. Like, she wasn't trained, so she could just be very intuitive about what she did, and it worked out for her really well. There could be trouble with children here. She did have one child, but I don't know if she had others and maybe miscarriages. That would be likely based on this, but she would have one because Mars aspecting its own sign. That would probably give at least one kid. But all these natural malefics and stuff, it would be a problem. Yeah, and then sixth house lord is Venus and Anurata. So aspect its own. So again, she's going to have a very be able to overcome obstacles and enemies here. With that, Venus, the seventh house lord is Mercury. Aspect its own. That's going to give independent business. Mercury in its own house will give independent business. A lot of the time, Rahu is there, Ardra. So there's something stormy here, ambition here, aspected by Sun and Mercury. Oh yeah, I already had that. So there's going to be sadness here. The seventh house is partnership. So there's a lot of sadness related to her husband passing. Because again, Mercury's in Mulan, and Mercury's the lord of the seventh house here. Sun is also in Mulan, and that's the lord of the fifth house. So she lost her husband and father, and there was a lot of sadness related to that. Kind of like Mercury aspecting Gemini, But Gemini was a ninth house Rashi constellation for Camille Claudel's chart. So there was support there. There was a partner there. But then when Mercury probably was active, I didn't check this out, but probably when Mercury was active, like it's when he suddenly passed away. And he died very quickly. It said typhoid, but there's some theory that he actually died by suicide. Um, let's see here, Mars. There could potentially be here Mars. Mars. I'm not really seeing infections here. There might be some mental, emotional health issues, physical health issues for the husband. That's a possibility. I don't know. I didn't look too deeply into it, but I think that's possible in this chart. I'm not seeing infection here. We're not seeing Mars. We're seeing Mars with K2. We only see Mars with K2 in the fifth house. That would give problems with children and infection with children. Mars and K2 in the ninth house. Also, the father probably suddenly passed, but I'm not seeing it with husband here. But yeah, so maybe that's a possibility. That thought of him having some mental illness that caused his demise. But there's a lot of ambition here in the seventh house of independent business and a lot of skill related to independent business as well, a mastery of that. Then the eighth house here, maybe Swamoon, which would give her a lot of imagination and intuition, which wouldn't surprise me. But if not that, it's aspected by Mars, where it's debilitated, and Saturn here. So this is going to be a nurturing Imagineer, like Walt Disney used to call his engineers who were also very imaginative. They weren't just sort of like hands-on, but they could, design things in new and innovative and, bettering, the uh, instruments and process type of way. In the ninth house here, the ninth house lord is Sun, a retrograde Saturn, or sorry, retrograde Jupiter aspected by K2 and Mars. So, a very unusual father, which he was, but also a leader and of enterprise and law and politics. But he was unusual because he supported her. Like, I guess when her husband died, he said, "Well, look, if you do an apprenticeship and learn the trade from somebody else, I'll support you," and tide you over until you get this up and running. And so he was willing to do that, which is a very unusual back in this day and time. Then the tenth house lord is Mercury. Dual Earth products here. Again, probably the champagne and wine. I don't know if she produced anything else, but it looks like she had a couple lines of business going on here, lines of work. Then the 11th house here, Lord is Venus. Saturn is exalted. It's aspected by Rahu here. Ambition, longevity, groups. There was some drain of income, I think, at different times. Like money would come in and then it would go out when there were problems with the crop, or problem with group. Actually, there's a movie on her too called Widow Clicquot, and I think there was a thing where she was just trying to get her product out, like it was a good product, but she was just trying to get her product out to people and develop a name and brand recognition and all that. And so she like there was a lot of upfront money that all like dwindled away until she really finally got some traction on her, business and products and all that kind of stuff. So, so there was, I think, a times drain on her income. Money would come in and then it just go out, reinvesting in the business or whatever. But this also means like international outreach, which happened. And then the 12th house here, the Lord is Mars. Venus is an honorata. So again, this is a luxury product, international trade. It was champagne, that's what it's known for, right? An honorata, this is people like a positive alliance of people and relationships. This is people celebrating around the world. Like, again, New Year's Eve. I mean, that's why I thought, oh, look, her chart looks like the current sky pattern. But I thought, oh, champagne, kind of maybe get us in the mood of celebrating the New Year's coming up. And also, like, this would be like a high social network. this is a network of well-to-do people, landowners, farmers such as herself, unusual people that eventually, through word of mouth and her high social network, helped develop her brand. Um, yeah, so apparently she was the first woman, I don't know if it was just in France or around the world, who owned and led a champagne business. She's considered to be the grande dame of champagne. And there is a movie out on her too called Widow Clicquot. I don't know if that's on Amazon or Netflix or maybe both. But yeah, interesting movie. That's where I learned about her, and she inspired me to look up her chart. Yeah, so interesting life, interesting chart. But again, the reason why I brought this up now, not just because she produced champagne, and I wish you all a very happy New Year for sure. Um, but yeah, I mean, again, her life and quite dramatic, and luckily for her was successful. But again, we're going to be experiencing a lot of these energies through the next month or so. So yeah, hold on to your hats, folks. All right. So as always, thanks so much for stopping by and listening to one of my talks, and really thank you all for especially those of you who are either new or repeat visitors. I appreciate all your support for my work and the channel and all the ways you guys do that. Again, just stopping by, listening, really makes a difference. And people who are liking and sharing and subscribing and, chatting with me in the comments and sending in donations, and all of it's very much appreciated. So thank you much all for that. Um, all of my teaching videos and on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. For more famous charts, check out my birth chart archive list 2025 video, where I list all the famous charts I've analyzed on the channel and the videos you can find them in, at least up until April of 2025, and then I'll update because I do so many famous charts. It looks like I'm gonna update this list every year, so there'll be a new list in the spring of 2026. And then I do offer individual birth chart readings, and then again I'm offering that intro level 1 course in January. So if any of that's interesting to you, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info on those things. And then I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine. I talk about Ayurveda, traditional Indian medicine, and yoga, so other Vedic arts, as well as other paradigms of medicine like homeopathy, naturopathic medicine. And the name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too for you. All right, so as always, I hope you found this work interesting, helpful, and useful to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. And I wish all of you all the best in the new year. All right, take good care. Namaste.